The ceramic mug on my desk says, "Witness." My students made it for me 4 years ago after I told them once that the most important civic skill in America is knowing how to document what you see. They thought it was funny. I thought it was everything. I still drink my coffee out of it every morning, and I thought about it a lot during what happened with our HOA, because witnessing and documenting is exactly how we survived it. Let me tell you what Pamela Whitfield did. She called the police on my wife. She filed an official complaint with the Cary Police Department claiming that my wife, Diane, had come to her door and made verbal threats. She told the responding officers she felt unsafe in her own home. She had been planning that call for weeks. I believe she thought it would be the end of us. What Pamela Whitfield did not know is that my wife is the Assistant State Prosecutor for Wake County, North Carolina, and one of the 2 officers who came to our door that evening had testified in 3 of Diane's cases that year alone. I need you to stay with me through this story, because what Pam Whitfield did to us was not just humiliating. It was a scheme, and by the time it was over, it was not just us she had done it to. I want you to understand the full picture, because that picture is why I am sitting here talking about it now. What would you have done if someone called the police on your spouse at your own home and you had done absolutely nothing wrong? I genuinely want to know. Tell me in the comments, because I still ask myself what would have happened if Diane had been home alone that night. Let me back up and tell you who I am. My name is Calvin Osei. I am 52 years old. I live in Cary, North Carolina, and I have lived there for 6 years. I served 10 years in the United States Army, Staff Sergeant, military intelligence, mostly stateside, and 1 rotation in Germany. I got out when I was 33, finished my education degree on the GI Bill, and I have been teaching high school history at Green Hope High School ever since, 11th year now. I teach a unit every spring on property rights, civil rights, and what happens in America when those 2 things collide. I am not telling you that as irony. I am telling you that because what happened to us turned out to be exactly the kind of thing I teach about, and that made it feel personal in a way I was not prepared for. My wife Diane grew up in Durham. She was the first person in her family to attend college, NC State for undergrad, UNC School of Law. She has been a prosecutor for 16 years. She is not a loud person. She's the kind of person who listens carefully and says precise things. When Diane speaks, people pay attention. We have been married for 23 years. We bought our house at 4412 Millbrook Trail in the Oakwood Estates community in August of 2019. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a detached 2-car garage in the back, and a 1/4 acre that backs up to a small creek. We paid $312,000. We had been saving for 8 years. My parents came from Accra in 1971 with $40 and a suitcase. They spent 20 years working before they owned anything with their names on it. The first time my mother walked through our front door on Millbrook Trail, she pressed her hand against the door frame and held it there for a moment, like she was making sure it was real. That house was not just a house. It was the next chapter in a longer story. The garage matters. I need you to remember the garage. It comes back. We had a permit from Wake County to convert the detached garage into a home office and guest studio. Pulled it in February of 2021. Everything stamped and approved. The contractor finished in May. We had submitted an architectural modification request to the HOA in March and were waiting on their formal response. We assumed the process would be straightforward. I did not yet know what straightforward meant to Pamela Whitfield. I met Pam for the first time on a Tuesday evening in June of 2021. I had just come home from a long parent conference day, still in my school clothes. She knocked on our door at 6:15. She was in her late 50s, maybe 60, with a tan that came from leisure rather than labor, and a blazer that probably cost more than my first car. She had a smile that moved her mouth but did not travel anywhere else on her face. She introduced herself as the president of the Oakwood Estates HOA and said she was stopping by as a courtesy. She said the garage conversion had not received formal architectural approval from the board. She said the exterior lighting and the window configuration were not in compliance with the community standards document, Section 4, Paragraph 9. She had a copy with her. She had highlighted the relevant passages in yellow. She handed it to me. And then she said something I have not forgotten. She looked at the garage. Then she looked back at me. And she said, "We like to keep things consistent here. This is a certain kind of neighborhood. I'm sure you understand." I understood exactly what she meant. I am 52 years old. I have been black in America my entire life. I understood the sentence underneath the sentence, and I kept my face very calm and thanked her for stopping by. I kept that highlighted document. I had a feeling I was going to need it. Remember that document. The courtesy visit became a formal violation notice 2 weeks later. It cited the window configuration and a non-approved exterior material on the north-facing wall, dated June 29th, 2021. The fine was $350 per week until remediation. I called the Wake County Permit Office on July 6th and spoke to a supervisor named Rena Park. She confirmed in writing that our project was fully compliant with county code. I have that email. I printed it the same night and started a folder on my desktop labeled Oakwood. I did not know then that folder would grow to 43 documents. The HOA hired a code enforcement consultant who came to our property twice in August. Both visits found nothing actionable under county ordinance. The HOA issued a second violation notice anyway, citing a new clause, Section 7, Paragraph 2, regarding drainage proximity. That clause had not been mentioned once in Pam's original visit, in the first notice, or anywhere in their previous correspondence. They were fishing, and every time they cast a new line, I wrote down the date, the language, the name, and the change. I printed it, filed it, added it to the folder. Here is what was actually at risk. By September, the HOA had threatened to file a lien against our property for unpaid assessments tied to the unresolved violation. A lien clouds your title. It can complicate a refinance, a home equity line, your estate planning, and in the Oakwood Estates governing documents, which I had now read 3 times, an unresolved lien gave the board a path toward foreclosure proceedings. I want you to hear that clearly. They had the legal framework to move toward taking our home over a window configuration, and they knew that. My neighbor, Jerome Akintola, came over on a Saturday morning in October. Jerome is 61, retired from the Raleigh Police Department after 24 years, the last 8 as a homicide detective. He brought good coffee from a shop he likes on Kildare Farm Road, and he sat down at our kitchen table with the kind of stillness that comes from a man who has learned to choose his words carefully. He told me we were not the first. He told me about the Nguyen's on Bayberry Court, who built a screen porch in 2018. By the time the HOA was done with them, they had paid over $12,000 in combined fines and legal fees, listed the house in 2019, and moved to Apex. He told me about the Washingtons on Millbrook, a different family, who tried to add a sunroom in 2020 and withdrew the project and put the house on the market 6 months later. Both families were families of color. Jerome is a careful man. He does not overstate things. He looked at me across the kitchen table and said quietly, "Calvin, this is not random, and someone is benefiting from it." I stopped thinking about defending my garage that morning. I started thinking about something larger, but I was not ready for what came next. December 3rd, 2021. Diane went for her Saturday morning run. She took the route past Sycamore Ridge Drive the way she had every weekend for 2 years. She was wearing earbuds. She was focused on her pace. She says she may have waved as she passed Pam's house. She is not certain. She kept running. That evening, 2 officers from the Cary Police Department came to our door. They had a complaint filed by Pamela Whitfield, 518 Sycamore Ridge Drive. The complaint stated that Diane Osei had come to the property and made verbal threats and intimidating statements toward the homeowner. I opened the door. One of the officers, Sergeant Ray Morales, looked past me, saw Diane standing at the bottom of the stairs, and I watched something complicated happen on his face. He said, "Mrs. Osei." Diane said, "Sergeant Morales, how are you?" He had testified in 3 of her cases. He knew her. He knew she was a prosecutor. And he knew, looking at that complaint, that what he was holding did not match the woman standing in front of him. He was professional. They both were. They documented the response, noted the alleged conduct could not be verified, gave Diane the case number, and left. The whole visit was 12 minutes. I want to tell you what it felt like to stand in my own doorway and watch two officers come to my house because my neighbor had decided to weaponize the police against my wife, even knowing Diane was safe, even knowing how it was going to go. There was something that moved through me standing there that I do not have a clean word for. It was not fear exactly. It was something older than that, the kind of thing that lives in the bone. Have you ever had someone use the system that is supposed to belong to everyone equally, as a personal weapon against you? Tell me I am not alone in that, because if Diane had not been who she was, that encounter could have looked very different, and Pam Whitfield knew it. That same week, Pam began posting in the Oakwood Estates Facebook group vague language about homeowners who create hostile environments, language about knowing your rights when neighbors become aggressive. No names. She did not need names. The geography of the neighborhood did that work for her. 3 families we had known since we moved in went quiet. The Harrises on our street, their daughter, had been in our son's playgroup since he was 4, went cold almost overnight. Diane said that part was the hardest, not the police visit, not the fines, the sound of a friendship going silent. Pam also contacted the school board. She filed a complaint suggesting I had a professional conflict of interest because I was involved in a property dispute while teaching a civil rights curriculum. It went nowhere, but I did not know it would go nowhere when I first heard about it. I am a teacher. My license matters. That is what the complaint was designed to make me feel. They were sipping champagne at their board events. I was reading property law at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning. I want to be honest with you. There was a night in January where I came close to telling Priya, our attorney, who I will tell you more about in a moment, to take whatever they offered, pay the fines, sell the house, walk away from every dollar we had put into that neighborhood. Every Saturday morning, Diane spent running those streets. Every moment my mother had touched that doorframe. I almost did it, but I did not. I want to tell you what changed. It was a Tuesday night in January, late. Diane was at the table working on case files. I was in the living room holding the witness mug and rereading the Oakwood folder from the beginning. Every document, every date, every name, start to finish. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, I noticed something. Not in what was there, in what was missing. Every architectural violation notice, every complaint, every piece of HOA correspondence against us was in the public record. Our requests were there. Our denials were there. But I could not find a single record of architectural approvals for comparable projects by other homeowners in the last 5 years. The Millers on Creekside had added a 2-story addition in 2020. The Hendersons on Maple View had enclosed a covered patio that doubled their footprint. Neither project had a violation on record. Neither had any visible approval documentation in the shared files either. Under North Carolina General Statute 47F, the Planned Community Act, HOAs are legally required to maintain records accessible to all homeowners. Architectural requests, approval decisions, and violation documentation all have to be on file. Ours were there in full. Theirs were not. Here is something I want you to carry with you because it may protect you someday. When an HOA enforces its covenants against some homeowners and not others, and especially when that pattern follows racial lines, that is not just procedurally unfair. It is legally actionable under the Fair Housing Act. Selective enforcement of HOA rules that disproportionately burdens a protected class can constitute housing discrimination, and it also undercuts the enforceability of those same covenants against you. You cannot selectively apply a rule and then invoke it as law. That was the foundation of our case. I called Priya Chandrasekaran the next morning. Priya is an attorney in Raleigh, real estate and civil rights primarily. Diane had worked with her on a civil asset forfeiture case years earlier and described her as someone with exactly zero patience for what Priya herself calls paper tyrants. She looked at the folder I sent her and called me back in 2 hours. She said, "Calvin, this is not a covenant dispute. This is a fair housing case. That was the first thing that changed. The second came from Jerome, his former colleague at the Raleigh PD, a woman named Sandra Birch, who now worked for a regional title company, reached out to him in February. She had heard through Jerome what was happening to us. She told him she had processed title work on 2 properties in Oakwood Estates that had sold under distress, the Nguyens property on Bayberry Court, one other she could not yet name. Both had been acquired by a real estate LLC called Ridgeway Acquisitions Partners. Ridgeway Acquisitions Partners was registered to a man named Dale Whitfield, Pamela Whitfield's brother-in-law. Sandra had an internal memo from 2019, a title company document flagging that the property at 221 Bayberry Court had sold at more than 18% below assessed market value, following what the file described as a prolonged HOA compliance dispute. The memo had been flagged as unusual. Nobody followed up. Sandra was willing to provide an affidavit. Jerome had 2 families, the Nguyens and the Washingtons, who were willing to submit written accounts of their own disputes and the pressure they had experienced during them. Priya filed a housing discrimination complaint with Archard on March 4, 2022. She filed a motion for discovery of all HOA financial records, board correspondence, and architectural approval documentation for the preceding 5 years. She filed a complaint with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission regarding Pam's real estate license, because yes, Pam Whitfield held a real estate license based on evidence of steering and predatory acquisition connected to her position on the board. The hearing before the Wake County Superior Court was set for April 29th. That gave us 56 days. And then, 3 weeks before the hearing, something happened that I still have trouble talking about. We came home on a Wednesday evening to find the north-facing wall of the converted garage, the specific wall Pam had cited in her original complaint, painted with a wide black streak. Not a message, not a symbol, just damage. Could have been random. Probably was not. 2 nights later, I got a voicemail from a number I did not recognize. A man's voice. He said my name. He said we needed to think carefully about what we were pursuing. He said these things have a way of complicating people's lives in ways they do not expect. He said Diane's career, my career, and then he said our son's name. I sat in my car in the school parking lot after I listened to it. I did not go inside. I did not start the engine. I sat there for a long time thinking about what it means when someone says your child's name as a way of making a point. And then I called Diane. She listened. She was quiet for a moment, and she said, "Save it. Do not delete a single second. Send it to Priya tonight." That was all she said. Priya filed an emergency motion to include the voicemail as evidence. She subpoenaed the phone records attached to that number. The device was prepaid, purchased at a Walmart in Fuquay-Varina, but the cell tower data put it within 8 blocks of 518 Sycamore Ridge Drive at the time of the call. I want you to understand what I was looking at right then. A court date 23 days away. A woman with 2 attorneys who had been running this operation for years before we moved in. Fines, a threatened lien, a police complaint, a school board complaint, a Facebook campaign, physical vandalism, and now a voicemail that said my son's name, and a clock running. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened the folder one more time. 43 documents, 2.5 years of paper. I looked at the original highlighted covenant packet Pam had handed me on our doorstep in June of 2021, and I thought about what she said. This is a certain kind of neighborhood. She was right. She just did not know what kind. April 29th, 2022. Wake County Superior Court, Courtroom 4B. I wore the same suit I wore to my mother's funeral. I do not know exactly why I chose it. It felt like the right weight for the day. Pam Whitfield was already seated when we arrived. 2 attorneys on either side of her. She wore a grey blazer. She did not look at us when we came in. Her attorneys spoke to each other in the low, practiced murmur of people who are trying to project that this is already decided. Priya laid the case out in 3 distinct layers. First, the documented pattern of selective enforcement. 5 years of HOA records showing that every formal architectural denial under Pam's board tenure had been issued against households of color. Comparable or larger projects by other homeowners, documented through county permit records since the HOA had conveniently omitted their own approvals from the shared files, had faced no violations, no fines, no compliance consultants, zero. Second, the financial trail. Ridgeway Acquisitions Partners, Dale Whitfield. The Nguyens property sold at a significant discount following a manufactured compliance crisis. The Washingtons' property sold under similar circumstances 18 months later. Sandra Birch's memo. Jerome's affidavits from both families. A pattern of predatory acquisition facilitated by the HOA President's Enforcement Authority. Third, the police complaint. Sergeant Morales' written statement confirming that the complaint filed by Pamela Whitfield on December 3rd had no evidentiary basis. Diane's case number and response documentation. Pam's Facebook post from the same week, taken together, a coordinated intimidation campaign, and then Priya played the voicemail. The courtroom went very quiet. One of Pam's attorneys leaned over and said something low to the other one. Pam looked down at the table in front of her. Her hands were flat against it. The court found sufficient basis to order a full audit of HOA financial records and architectural approval documentation for the preceding 5 years. It issued a temporary injunction against any further fines, liens, or compliance actions against our property pending investigation. The HUD complaint was already open and moving through federal process. The State Real Estate Commission had its own proceeding underway. Priya told me afterward that criminal referral was a matter of when, not if. I looked at Pam Whitfield. When the judge read the order into the record, she was still looking at the table. I do not know if she looked up at any point during the hearing. I cannot tell you. I stopped watching her. I did not feel what I had expected to feel. I expected relief. What I actually felt was quieter than that, the kind of feeling you get after carrying something heavy for a very long time, when you finally set it down and realize how tired your arms actually are. I did not smile. I did not say a word to her. I just sat there steady. 2 months later, the Oakwood Estates Board voted to remove Pam Whitfield from her position. The audit uncovered $38,000 in unexplained disbursements from the HOA's Maintenance Reserve Fund over 4 years. 3 homeowners, including the Nguyens, who had moved to Apex, filed separate civil actions. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission suspended Pam's license. The DA's office, entirely separate from Diane's unit, opened a review. Pam has not made any public statement. Neither have her attorneys. The converted garage is still standing. We repainted the north-facing wall in June. Used the same warm grey from the original design spec. My son helped. He is 17. He does not fully understand everything that happened, but he was there holding the trim steady while I painted, and he knows that we did not leave. That matters to me more than I can say. I still drink my coffee from the witness mug. Every morning, I look at it and I think about what I tell my students. The most important civic skill is knowing how to document what you see. Sign your name to it. Date it. Keep the copy. I want to say something to you directly before I close. Your name on a deed is not ceremonial. It is a legal ownership interest. The HOA does not own your property. It governs the shared community. Those are not the same thing. And when governance becomes a predatory instrument, when the rules are applied selectively, when paper weaponry comes out, when people with more apparent resources try to drain you into submission, documentation is your foundation, not confrontation, not anger. The paper trail is the weapon, and it is available to anyone who is willing to build it. Know what is in your governing documents before a dispute starts. Keep every notice, date every phone call, and send a follow-up email summarizing what was said. Request every approval and denial decision in writing. Under North Carolina's Planned Community Act, and under most state equivalents, your HOA is legally required to provide you access to its records. A refusal to provide those records is itself a violation. That refusal is itself evidence. And know this, selective enforcement of HOA covenants is not a technicality. It is a legal vulnerability that can invalidate the enforcement action against you. and expose the board to far larger liability than anything they were trying to collect from you. If your neighbor's comparable project sailed through and yours is being prosecuted, that asymmetry is worth documenting and worth discussing with an attorney. My name is Calvin Osei. I am 52 years old. I am still right here in Cary, North Carolina, at 4412 Millbrook Trail, in the house with the warm grey garage and the east-facing window that Pamela Whitfield said was out of compliance. My mother pressed her hand against our front door frame the first time she walked through it. She is 81 now, and she came by in July to see the repainted wall. She looked at it for a moment. Then she walked inside. I did not walk away from what we built. Neither should you.